Our mission statement is helping everybody take their next step closer to Jesus, and we want to grind that into our minds. We just don't want that to be lost or forgotten or misplaced or unattended to. I want to start with an object lesson. I'm going to ask you if this is real or fake news. I know maybe you're sick of it. You're sick of the AI-generated images. You're sick of not being able to tell what's real and what's not. You're sick of your great-grandma forwarding you something that you're like, that's not true, great-grandma. You can tell. It's, whatever. But we're going to do it. We're going to practice a little bit as a congregation. So is this real or fake? First, one, a major U.S. airline has announced it's testing a child-free seating section on select flights. Passengers can pay a fee to sit in a noise-controlled zone. Is that real or is that fake? I'm hearing maybe 50-50, maybe 60-40. That right there, people, for some reason, hate seeing little children on flights. I do not know why. I have a lot of sympathy because as a parent who has had a little child on a flight, I know what it's like. And what are you expecting? You're getting on a tiny little tube with a bunch of people. Of course, there's going to be noise. It's just going to happen. This is fake. This is not real. I know it maybe feels like to you like, oh, that would be a wonderful idea. I would pay an extra $30 to sit in a noise-controlled area, but you're a bad person. That's the... All right, number two, is this real or fake? The European Union has passed a law requiring all smartphones, tablets, and most small electronics sold in member countries to use a standardized charging port to reduce the proprietary charging cables. So every time you get a new phone, you have to get a new cable, and now you have all these old cables that don't fit with your old phones. Is that real or is that fake? All right, well, almost consensus. Now, this is a good idea. And the EU did do it. They've enacted a law that everything has to be USB-C, and I think that makes sense. That totally makes sense. That is true. That is absolutely true. Here's a little evidence for you. I think that's good. We have so many cables at our house that are just like nothing actually fits. All right, 3. Is this real or is this fake? Every year, an Italian town locks the politician who has made the worst decision of the year in a cage and dunks them in a freezing river. The town, of course, cheers. Is this real or is this fake? This is off of Facebook. This is a screenshot from Facebook. Is that? And you're like, oh, okay, never mind. I thought it was real, but now it's Facebook, you said. 90% of what's on Facebook is fake, by the way. Just heads up. That's a stat that came up from me. I just made that up just now. So is that real or is that fake? It's kind of both, actually. It's a fun little thing that they do. They don't actually dunk the politician, but there's like a volunteer who stands in for the politician, and they dunk that person, and everybody celebrates. I think this is a great idea. This is a tremendous idea. I think we should dunk the politician. I think we should all get together and be like, that was really bad, and you're going down. I think that would be great. It used to be all about misinformation, that there were mistakes or misunderstandings or we just didn't know enough. If you can read old advertisements, it'll be like 4 out of 5 doctors recommend this cigarette brand. And you look back on that now and you're like, okay, what was going on with that? That was ridiculous. That was, 70, 80 years ago, or maybe more. But now what we're dealing with a lot is disinformation, and it's intentional. It's designed to make you mad. It's designed to evoke some kind of response. It's designed to cause fear or outrage. And it really, truly is all over social media. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you're probably angry all the time because you're seeing this stuff all the time. You've seen it. You've seen pictures. You've seen images. You've seen posts. And you have felt feelings because of fake news. You have had conversations with people because of something that wasn't true. This has all happened to you. Now, if you're intentionally being scammed, if you know you're being scammed, it's a super unpleasant feeling. We don't like that feeling that somebody is out there trying to trick us, trying to make us mad, trying to get our money. It's a terrible feeling. We don't like that at all. But here's the question we want to explore today and in this series. What if you're scamming yourself? What if the source of misinformation is you and you're like, well, that cannot be right. I believe everything that's true and everything that's true I believe. But what if you're scamming yourself? I want to talk about just briefly about how our thoughts in our brains, the things that we think are super strange. They're weird. Think about your thoughts. And I don't mean specific thoughts. I don't want to hear about your dreams, but think about your thoughts. You can have two different thoughts in your head that are competing. You can have two different thoughts that disagree with one another, and they both exist in your head. You can go to the fridge, open it up, and think, man, I'm sure hungry. And then there's this other thought that says, no, you're actually not hungry. You just ate dinner. You're bored. Those are two different thoughts in your head. I want to go for a run. I want to lay on the couch. Those are two different thoughts that exist in your head. How is that possible? Competing thoughts that exist in your head. Your thoughts can have a physical impact on your body. The ideas that waft through your brain can have a physiological reaction, cause a physiological reaction. Scary thoughts, they get the heart racing. Romantic thoughts can make your stomach flutter. Anxious thoughts can literally make you break out in hives. Sad thoughts, they make like salt water come out from little pipes in your eyeballs and stream down your face. Sad thoughts. Thoughts can have a physiological reaction in your body. That's wild. That is so crazy to think about. Imagine here, just right before I got up on stage, I walked up to you, just you, and I said, hey, I'm really not feeling well. I got my notes for the sermon on the iPad. I need you to preach. How many of you, even knowing that that's not true, felt a little bit like, oof, just like a little, I don't want to get up on stage and speak. That sounds awful. I mean, that's a thought that had a physiological reaction. I'm not going to do it, but what if I showed you a picture of a snake or a spider? Even just saying the words for some people are like, oof, I got my skin just crawled a little bit. Some people have words that trigger a psychological gag reflex. Did you know that there are specific words that bother you just to hear? If someone were to say the word moist, secretion, mucus, phlegm. These are all parenting situations too, by the way. Yeah, it causes like a reaction. Your thoughts cause a physiological reaction. You can think thoughts that you're unaware of. You can think thoughts that you don't know you're thinking. You can have ideas wafting through your brain that you're not conscious of, that you can't articulate. You can have an experience that makes you happy or uncomfortable, but you're not sure why. There's some thought that's bouncing around in there that you can't put words to, but exists, and it makes you think things. You can think thoughts that aren't your thoughts. How about that? People can plant ideas in your head that aren't your thoughts. Now, I know we all don't think we're susceptible to advertising, but you can watch a commercial for a hamburger and think like, well, that would never affect me. And then 15 minutes later think, I want a hamburger, and not realize the two were connected. They planted a thought in your head. You can think thoughts that aren't your thoughts. Or maybe you have parents who had strong opinions about stuff that you inherited. You don't really share it, but somehow when you're in a situation where you can hear your dad's voice or your mom's voice and you feel feelings because of it, you can have thoughts that aren't your thoughts. And here, most importantly, the thing that I think we want to really emphasize is your thoughts aren't always true. Your thoughts aren't always true. Maybe more thoughts than you think aren't true. So here's a thought. You can have physical reactions to conflicting, untrue thoughts that aren't your thoughts that you don't even realize you're thinking. That's true. Thoughts are strange and powerful, but you can change your thoughts. And this is what we want to begin to tackle in this series. You can change your thoughts. In fact, maybe one of the most powerful things you can do is begin to change your thoughts, to think new thoughts, to question your thoughts. I think this is why the Bible speaks so much about thinking. It speaks so much about the mind and what goes into our mind and what we dwell on and what we fill ourselves with. If you think back to Genesis chapter 3, everything is perfect. The world has been created. Everything is beautiful and ideal. And you can envision whatever perfect natural world that you want. But this looked pretty nice to me. You know, a little waterfall, a tree, the colors. This looked pretty nice. Whatever it is, it's perfect. It's a perfect situation. It's a perfect environment. Everything's great. You're in a pristine, lush garden. The temperature had to be pretty nice, right? In the Garden of Eden. Temperature had to be pretty good because nobody's wearing any clothes. Had to be just right. You're with one other human. You are with another human who was specifically designed to be compatible with you. I mean, this is pretty nice so far. This is a pretty great situation. All the stuff that makes it hard to relax on a vacation doesn't exist. You know what I'm talking about? When you're on vacation and you're sitting there and you're trying to relax, and the harder you try to relax, the more stuff fills your mind, like the spreadsheets and the deadlines and the things, and I get this done, did I get that done? And you try to force it out of your mind, and it's hard to force it out of your mind. You're just sitting there feeling anxious because you're not relaxing hard enough and the vacation's almost over. None of that existed. None of that existed. There's no spreadsheets. There's no IRS withholdings. There's no geopolitics. There's no microplastics. You're just there, and everything is perfect. And so how did everything go sideways? How did this perfection get ruined? Well, the short answer is a thought. Just a thought. A thought crept in and changed everything. Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Genesis 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the other wild animals. Just to hang on just for a second. Let's talk about a talking snake just for a second. Okay? Because I think we're scared enough of snakes as they are. And I think if snakes began to talk, what would you do? Like if snakes could talk, that would be terrifying. There's lots of theological thought around this. Some of you are like, a talking snake? I don't know. What am I supposed to do with that? Let me just say a couple things. First of all, we accept a lot of supernatural in the Bible. It is a little ironic to me that people will be like, well, yeah, I believe Jesus Christ was a son of God, and then he came to earth as a baby, and he lived, and he died, and he rose again. I believe that. Talking snakes? I don't know. Once we have moved into the world of the supernatural, I don't know why we're so eager to pick and choose. I get that it's hard, to wrap our minds around. But also, if you're creating a story where you're going to exemplify evil, it makes sense that you would make the representation of evil a snake that talks. It makes sense. Because what happens in this story is self-evidently true. You've all experienced it. Not the talking snake, but you've experienced the dynamics of what happens in this story. So here's what happens. Everything's perfect. Everything's wonderful. There's this serpent, more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God has made. He said to the woman, did God really say? It's just a question. Just a question. Did God really say that you must not eat of any tree of the garden? Did God really say that? Did God say that? It's a simple question. And by the way, it's the first ever question asked in the Bible. It's the first ever question that is posed in Scripture at all, and it ruins everything. It's the title of the new sermon series that we're starting in. Did God really say? And I think this is pretty clever. I made a little snake out of really. It's pretty good, huh? I like that. I just wanted to make sure you all noticed. Did God really say? This question is diabolical. This question is diabolical. The reason it's diabolical is because, first of all, it's incredibly subtle. It's just so subtle. Did God really say? The adversary, the enemy, the accuser isn't coming up to Eve and saying, God's a big meanie pants. I'm just asking questions. God's a big jerk. Oh, no. Did God really say this thing that you can't eat of any of the fruit of the tree in any of the garden? Now, we know, if you've read the story, we know that isn't what God said. But it's this question. It's so subtle. The very first time I spoke at the chapel where my kids go to school, they have lower school chapel and they have upper school chapel. I was asked to speak at the lower school chapel, and this is kindergarten through fifth grade or sixth grade at the time. And so I went in there, and I wanted to do a good job. I wanted these kids to have fun. I wanted it to be memorable. So I pulled out all the stops, and we had this room full. It's probably 300 or 400 kids, room full. And I get them pumped up. It was like a pep rally. They were screaming and shouting and getting all excited. And I thought, this is great. The kids are into this. The kids love this. I mean, you couldn't hardly quiet them down. Once you get like a third grader wound up, I mean, it's really hard to bring them down. So I got them all wound up, and I had a great time. I thought it was fun. I thought it was wonderful. After I got done, feeling like I had really done a good job getting these kids all excited about, everything in life, it wouldn't have mattered what I talked about. They were just excitable. The principal at the time, this is years ago, the principal at the time came up to me, and I thought she was going to say, oh, good job. You really handled that group of kids well, or I thought she was going to say something like that. That's not what she said. She said, "You've never spoken to children before, have you?" Do you think that was a compliment? It was not. The teachers weren't real excited that I had gotten all the kids wound up and then they're back to class to learn how to add and subtract. They weren't real excited about that. And this principal, with just a question, she didn't have to say, "You did not do a good job." She just asked a question. It's subtle. It's just a question. And it stuck with me. I remember this is like 15 years later. I still remember this. That's why the question is so subtle. It's just a hint. It's just a shadow of a doubt. It's like a sparkling water flavor. It's just barely there, right? Just a hint of raspberry. Non-invasive. And it can happen in all kinds of settings, not just in our relationship with God, but it can happen in like, hey, you could do this. You could ruin a coworker's day tomorrow by going up to them and it's like, have you heard about the layoffs? You can ruin their day. Ruin their day. It doesn't have to be true. You can really undermine a relationship. You could go up to your friend and you could say, "Oh, wait, you don't have the passcode to your husband's phone?" Oh. It's just a question. But it begins to undermine a little bit of substance, a little bit of trust in the relationship. "Oh, your wife doesn't let you go golfing on Saturdays?" It's just a question. "You're wearing that to dinner?" It's subtle. The question also begins to undermine God's character. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in just a minute, but God really said that. God really said that? You have all these trees, all these beautiful trees in the garden, and God said, don't eat from them. Maybe God's hiding something from you. God's keeping something good from you. God's withholding something from you. The question narrows perspective. I looked up this week, don't know if this is completely accurate or not, but according to Google, there are 3,000 varieties of trees that produce fruit that's edible, about 3,000. So let's imagine in the Garden of Eden, there were 3,000 different trees that produce fruit that's edible. And there's one tree that God said, that tree is off limits. Do not eat that fruit. So, by my count, I'm not great at math, but we still have 2,999 trees that they can eat from. And the serpent comes in and is like, "Oh, God doesn't want you to eat of the fruit." Well, we still have 2,999, but what's Adam and Eve doing now? They're thinking about that one. They're focused on that one. They've got all these wonderful things, all these wonderful gifts, and now they're focused on the one thing that God has said, "I don't want you eating that." It narrows perspective. Undermines character, narrows perspective. It's the same way. I think social media functions like this. A second before you were scrolling on social media and saw that person that you barely know posting pictures from their vacation, you were fine. And then as soon as you saw them on their vacation, you're like, why doesn't my husband ever take me on a vacation? Why doesn't my wife ever want to go on a vacation? You were fine 10 seconds ago, and now you're not fine. What happened? Just this little thought came in. And then finally, this question plants this thought. And this is the real power. What had been an external question voiced by an entity outside of Adam and Eve now becomes an internal thought. It's not out there anymore, it's in here. If we know someone is trying to scam us, then we can defend ourselves. When you get a call, your phone helpfully says scam likely or possible scam call. You get that now. And if you were to answer it, I don't know why you would, but if you were to answer it, you would be on the defensive. But what if we're scamming ourselves? What if the thought is in our own mind? There's an entire field of psychology called cognitive behavioral therapy. I got to be real careful because I am not a psychologist and I don't want you taking psychological advice from me. We do have counselors, therapists, psychologists that go to church here. So if I say anything crazy, you guys come up and tell me differently. But the whole premise of cognitive behavioral therapy is that your thoughts aren't always telling you the truth. They're not always telling you the truth. You already know this. You've had these untrue thoughts. I've got a list of them here. You've had these thoughts. Maybe you don't have them as often as you did when you were a kid, or maybe you still do. But you've had these thoughts. These thoughts are not true thoughts, but they're thoughts that exist in your brain. And they feel very true because they're coming from up here. I always mess everything up. Just most things, not everything. Nobody likes me. Well, your mom likes you, right? There's always an exception. If I don't fill in the blank, it could be anything. If I don't pass this test, then I'm going to flunk out of college. Then I'm not going to get the good job. Then I'm not going to have the career I want. Then I'm not going to have any money for retirement. Then I'm going to die lonely and broke on the side of the road. These things are not true. They must think I'm such a loser. You have no idea what they think. You can't read their mind. I should be so much further in life than I am. There's no standardized achievement test for adulthood. There's nothing like that. There's no further in life yet. I want you to think about this. Imagine if your child were getting text messages from somebody with those things in them. What would you feel? You'd be furious. You'd call the police, right? That's harassment. That's cyberbullying. There was a documentary not too long ago. Feel free to watch it. It's pretty wild. It's called Unknown Caller, but it was about a person cyberbullying a couple teenagers, jaw-dropping ending. The person that was doing that was arrested because they were sending messages like this to teenagers over and over and over again. They got arrested because it's illegal. It's illegal for you to send those things to someone else. But those things exist in your brain all the time in various forms, in different iterations, different language, different words. You're bullying yourself. You're telling yourself untrue thoughts. They're in your own brain. So that voice is in your head. But here is what is really crazy to me. This is really wild. There is another voice in your head. And this is incredibly important for us to know. This is incredibly important for every human to know. There is another voice in your head. And that other voice has the ability to think critically about the first voice. That other voice can look at said, well, no, you don't always mess everything up. That's not true. That's not who you are. That voice is in your head too. No, they don't think you're a loser. There's lots of people who don't think you're a loser. In fact, you don't know what they think. If you flunk this test, it's going to be fine. You probably won't remember in a year that you flunked this test. There's this other voice in your head that exists in your head. That is a wild thing to me. Remember, we can have competing thoughts in our heads. That second voice has the ability to critically think about the first one, to tell you. In fact, think about this. This is such an important feature to have. To have this thought, the thought that just came through my brain is not true. That is an incredibly important experience to have. That thought that just was in my brain is not true. Many of you are familiar with the story of the prodigal son. You're familiar with the dynamics of the story. This is Jesus telling the story. It's made up, but it's made up to prove a point. It's a son who demands his inheritance from his father before his father dies, and then the son goes and spends it. Like, it's just classic kids making bad decisions kind of thing. Son blows the inheritance, exactly everything you would think he would blow it on, and then he finally gets in this position where he's got no money. He's got to work feeding pigs, which would have been just a devastating career path for a young Hebrew boy, and he's there feeding the pigs, and this is what it says. Verse 16, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. He couldn't even get the food that the pigs were eating. And then verse 17, when he came to his senses, meaning he had been thinking a bunch of thoughts that weren't true, and all of a sudden things started to change and shift, and reality started to set in, and he realized, wait a second. He couldn't have made the choice he was about to make if he was thinking the thoughts that he had been thinking just before this moment. When he came to his senses, wait a second. This is not who I am. This is not my life. I've got a dad. I've got a dad who's still got a lot of money despite my best efforts. There's other choices. My father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death. He had this second thought, and he critically thought about that first one, that first thought. It's so interesting. He realized the voice he had been listening to wasn't telling him the truth, but he couldn't change his situation until his thoughts changed. That's a lot of us in the room. We are stuck not because we don't actually have options or choices or potential or possibilities, but because we're stuck in this loop of unhelpful, untrue thoughts that we can't get out of. And we're struggling with that. It's so interesting. A couple different cognitive behavior therapists, guys that wrote books about it, well-respected guys that wrote the book about it, gave name to the different voices in our heads. I think this is so interesting. So Stephen Hayes, he called the bad voice the dictator. The bad voice is like, you're wrong, you're terrible, you're evil, you're no good. That's the dictator. And he said, you got to question the dictator. There was an author by the name of Jeffrey Schwartz. He wrote a book called You Are Not Your Brain. And he said, you've got to listen to that other voice. And he called that other voice the wise advocate. Wise advocate. Very, very biblical. Very interesting. Look at what 2 Corinthians chapter 10 says, verse 3. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. It's not missiles and bombs. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. On the contrary, the weapons we fight with, they have the power to demolish strongholds. Look at on the contrary, they have the power to demolish strongholds. Verse 5, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. To be clear, what Paul, the author of this passage, is talking about is all these bad ideas that exist in the world, and we fight against those bad ideas. But those bad ideas plant themselves in our brains. It becomes our internal dialogue. He's talking about all the bad, untrue things about God, about Jesus that float through our culture. And you know people, you love people that won't step foot in this church because they have a bad idea about who God is or what church is or who Christians are. And they have allowed that bad idea to compel them to make choices that aren't good and choices that aren't healthy. But the truth is, even if we are here, sometimes we struggle with those same things as well. Several years ago, I printed out a list of cognitive distortions and I put it on our refrigerator because I wanted myself and everybody in our family just to have access to this. Like, hey, when you're feeling and thinking that way, you need to check your thoughts. Are you falling into one of these thought traps that we can fall into? Essentially, what this series is going to be about, is spiritual cognitive distortions. They're thoughts in our brains, voices in our heads that aren't telling us the truth. And I've been working on a list, and it really didn't take me that long, probably 10 minutes, to think about all the cognitive distortions, spiritual cognitive distortions that I've thought and I've heard from other people. I've got a big old list up here. These are things that you have thought, that your loved ones have thought, that you've heard other people express, that aren't true. We don't presume they're true just because they exist in our heads. This is a big list. You can't read it all. It's small print. But I just wanted to walk through 6 of them that I think are very common. We experience them very often, and maybe you've experienced them. Maybe you're experiencing them right now. Number 1, I'm too broken to be used or healed by God. I'm too broken. Number 2, if I keep failing, God will give up on me. Number 3, nobody at church cares about me. Number 4, I don't need anybody. I can handle this myself. I got this. It's a lie. You can't. Number 5, if I feel distant from God, He must be far from me. Number 6, this will never get better. This will never get better. The enemy wants to slither up to you and have you think these thoughts, these untrue thoughts, things that should not exist in your brain, things that you need to have a wise advocate challenge and tell you, this is not who you are, this is not who God is. The enemy wants you to think these things. The enemy is scamming you. And I just want you to think about how devastating even one of those thoughts are if it plants itself in your brain and begins to take root. Think about all the ways it affects you. God feels distant, so He must be distant. So why pray? Why encourage other people to pray? Why engage with Scripture? Why engage with Christian community? Why bother? All these things are progressive and they get worse. Let me give you just real quick, just so you can see what spiritual cognitive distortions do. Number one, they undermine God. They undermine the Word of God, the intention of God, and the character of God. Did God really say that? Number two, they distort good desire. It's good to be loved. It's good to want companionship. But those spiritual cognitive distortions distort good desires and encourage us to make bad choices. It wasn't bad for Eve to look at, wow, that fruit looks really good, but that's the one that God said don't eat. But it looks good, smells good, probably going to taste good, and it's going to have all these benefits. Number three, spiritual cognitive distortions traffic in near truth. It's close to truth. It's the aspartame of truth. It has similar effects, but it's not quite right. It's the impossible meat of truth. It's truth flavored. God wants me to be happy. I think God enjoys you enjoying life. Oh, but if God wants me to be happy, then I should do this thing. I should make this choice. I should commit this sin because that would make me happy. Well, wait, hang on. Number four, spiritual cognitive distortions. And this is so important. I want everybody to hear this. Spiritual cognitive distortions encourage greater isolation. They want you to avoid other Christians, other people, church. They want you to stay by yourself, to stay isolated, to not get better, to not get healthy. They're scamming you. And then number five, it's progressive. It gets worse. These distortions are sticky. It's kind of like when, not that you've ever done this or I've ever done this, but if you were to forge a path through a forest and you begin to hack down all the brush around you, that first time you've created a little path, but the more you walk on that path, the more you think those thoughts, the more embedded they get. And then once your brain says, oh, you like that thought? I'm going to feed you more of it. Your brain's got an algorithm just like your social media does. Oh, you like thinking that? Well, here's some confirmation bias. I'm going to ignore all the truth that says the thing isn't true, but let's focus on the ways that we can support this idea. It's like your social media, just like it. And I'll keep feeding you more of these ideas. So what do we do? All right, maybe I've made the case that some of our thoughts aren't healthy, some of our thoughts aren't good. What do we do? I think one of the most transformative things you can do is to begin to question. Begin to ask yourself, is that thing that I'm thinking, is that actually true? To recognize that in yourself. Is that really true? Any change you will ever experience in your life begins with a change of thinking. Any change. Any improvement in your marriage has to begin with a change of thinking. Because if you're thinking the thoughts that you've always thought, your marriage is going to be where it always is. Any improvement in your health, in your lifestyle, has to involve a change of thinking. I want to experience that more than I'm experiencing this. I'm going to make decisions to experience that more than I'm experiencing this. Every new habit begins with a new thought. Any spiritual transformation begins with a thought. Maybe we should go to church. Maybe I should read my Bible. Maybe I should try praying. But you have to notice what you're thinking. Let me wrap up with this. This is Ephesians chapter 4, just 2 verses in Ephesians chapter 4, and then we're going to call the praise team back up on stage. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17. This is Paul writing to a group of people and just trying to encourage them that the way that they had been thinking wasn't helpful, wasn't healthy. And he says this, I tell you this, I insist on it. I insist. You must no longer live as the Gentiles do. All right, well, we don't want to do all the bad things. And he says, actually, it's the futility of their thinking that's the problem. That's the danger. That's the thing you got to be aware of. It's not just the thought you have, but the way you think. Look what he says in just a few verses. Verse 23, he says, I want you to be made new in the attitude of your minds. You've got to take in a whole new way of thinking about yourself and about God and about church and about faith. You've got to be made new in a new attitude and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. We have to speak truth to ourselves. You know, one of the reasons, I'm sure there's a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons we worship, I think one of the reasons God encouraged worship, is because we're singing truth to ourselves and others. And something about singing it helps it get past some of those defenses, which is why a song can have a tremendous impact, a greater impact than maybe a sermon, ever could, because it sneaks past those cognitive defenses that you have that doesn't want to believe those things are true. So we're going to sing a song as we wrap up, a song that is full of truth. I'm going to ask the praise team to come up on stage. A song that is full of truth, a song that reminds us that God deeply cares, that he is good, that doesn't just filter out the truth, the true information to hold on to the negative. We're going to sing a song called Goodness of God. And I hope in this entire series, as we begin to question our thoughts, to question what's going on in our minds, we would recognize that God has provided truth for us, but we have got to think truth. We've got to fill our minds with truth. We've got to hold on to truth.